Hello, faithful, and welcome to the 49ers Plus podcast. I'm Al Moriello, and this is your source for the most objective 49ers discussion and analysis. And today we're going to be diving into the Javon Hargrave injury, what that means for the defensive line, the non-existent pass rush, and the defense as a whole. We're going to be talking Brandon Ayuk so far this season, a very slow start to the season, what Kyle Shanahan had to say about rookie wide receiver Jacob Cowing, more gaudy stats for Brock Purdy. We're going to briefly touch upon injuries before we break down 49ers-Pats 4:05 Eastern Standard Time this upcoming Sunday. No plus content again this week. It's going to be all 49ers all the time. So let's get right into it. So in the Rams game last week, defensive tackle Javon Hargrave suffered a torn tricep. As of this recording, I'm recording on Thursday. He has not been placed on IR yet, but the 49ers have made a roster move, at least to the practice squad that we're going to get into in a minute. But on the roster, it leaves defensive tackles Malik Collins, Jordan Elliott, and Kevin Givens. And now we can actually say the depth on the defensive line is an issue. People were saying that before the Hargrave injury, and I just maintained, hey, guys, you had three starting players at D end, Bosa, Yator, and Leonard Floyd, three starting players at D tackle, Hargrave, Collins, and Elliott. It's not really a depth issue. Is it a player performance issue? Is it a scheme issue? It might be all three now. Free agency, looked on Spotrac.com. D tackles, it's thin from a free agent standpoint. Maybe Hassan Ridgeway is someone that they can look at in the upcoming weeks, was with the 49ers for a brief stint last year. But instead of adding anybody to the roster, the 49ers signed defensive tackle Shaquille Brown to their practice squad. He's someone that was in camp with them. He is someone that the 49ers liked in 2023 as an undrafted rookie free agent coming out of Troy, signed with the Tennessee Titans instead, spent the entire year on their practice squad, was released from the practice squad in this offseason. The Niners signed him, but he did not make the cut when it came down to trimming the roster down to 53 for the start of the year. He joins veteran T.Y. McGill and undrafted rookie free agent Evan Anderson on the practice squad at defensive tackle. So they have 6 D tackles on the roster, right, guys? They have 3 on the 53, 3 on the practice squad. And they are still hoping that third-year player Kalia Davis can make a return from knee surgery mid-season. He is on IR, designated to return. We're only in week 4. He might be about 4 weeks away. I'm just guessing. But there is a player familiar with the system, not ready, but able to contribute at some point this season. Now, the plan is they're going to elevate and rotate, or potentially rotate, defensive tackles from the practice squad, right? We don't know who it's going to be this week. Probably won't be announced until Wednesday. Probably going to be T.Y. McGill, the veteran that's going to get the first crack at it. Remember, you can elevate a practice squad player 3 times before you have to make the decision to either leave him on the practice squad or, and if you do, the next elevation would be a full elevation to the 53-man active roster, meaning you'd have to cut someone off the roster if you are already at the limit. But they can rotate each one of these 3 players. McGill is the shorter, more squat veteran. So I'm sure this is who Sorensen and Kyle are going to lean to first. Evan Anderson, the biggest D tackle that they would have on the team roster or practice squad, at about 325. And Shaquille Brown, 6'3", 295, can play inside. You could put him outside potentially on base downs to hold the edge if you wanted to potentially move someone like Yator Gross-Matos inside. Again, I don't necessarily know if they would do that like on a first down, and I don't know if he'd be a player that when elevated would be a passing down type of D lineman or rusher. So they have numbers. Depth, yes, is an issue when you're missing a starter and someone who's played at a very high level throughout the course of his career. Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, and at least last year in San Francisco. But it feels like, and it sounds like, based on Kyle, it's going to be more than just plugging and playing somebody to replace Javon Hargrave because you're not going to replace the talent, right? You might be able to replace the production because let's be honest, Hargrave hasn't had a great start to the season. He did have 1 sack last week at the Rams, but nothing phenomenal to write home about. More of a pass rusher than a run stuffer. So there's potentially going to be some scheme changes involved in the defense. And here is a multi-sentence quote from Kyle Shanahan from his press conference that I wanted to read to you guys. Quote, per Kyle, you would love to always get there with the front 4. That's the goal. Getting there with 4 and having 7 guys in coverage makes it a lot harder for the offense when your defense isn't busting coverages, Kyle. But if you can do that, you've got to mix it up. We mix it up throughout the year. I thought our D-line last week affected the quarterback the most that they had in their 3 games. I thought that they had one of their better games, but it's a huge loss losing Javon. Guys are going to have to step up. And when you don't have the rush, then you've got to turn to other things schematically. Now, it's a shame. I think we're only 3 weeks into the season, and the Rams game was so bad and so unacceptable for a multitude of reasons that it's an injury to Hargrave that's causing them to look at things schematically. It's not the fact that since the Jets game, week 1, the defense has regressed in week 2 at the Vikings and week 3 at the well undermanned Rams. And one of those schematic changes could be a 5-man front. If you're not getting there with 4, might as well try getting there with 5. We did see this a handful of times against the Rams. They weren't necessarily the reasons for sacks on one of the plays. Practice squad player who was elevated, Sam Okiwanu, wound up coming unblocked and sacking Matthew Stafford. That was a protection bust on the Rams O-line part. Nothing that the D-line, Chris Kasorek or Nick Sorensen schemed up. But these schematic changes, and we'll never know, right, should have been kicked around after that Rams game. When you're not getting home with 4 against an O-line missing 3 starters, it's time to change things up. And they're fortunate that they have a team coming in the Patriots who are wildly offensively challenged, a much better defense than offense. But even then, in parts, the Patriot defense is very middling or lacking. But I want to go back into some of these sentences in that long quote I read for you that Kyle mentioned. I thought our D-line affected the quarterback the most that they had in their 3 games last week. They better have. Again, it was the Rams. They were depleted. I use the phrase, they were playing against the Rams preseason offense, plus Stafford and Kyron Williams. I thought that they had one of their better games. Again, they should have had, but not enough, not to the point where, forget about taking over a game, D-line, linebacker, secondary, defense as a whole. That would be the goal, having closers on 3rd downs, getting off the field. But how about just bottling up an offensively challenged team, at least personnel-wise, that the Rams were, and getting away with a victory by scoring 24 points, which should be enough given the personnel that's on this 49ers defense to beat a depleted Rams team or to beat the vast majority of teams in the NFL that are at full strength. So if the 5-man front's going to be a schematic change, are they going to send more? When you have a 5-man front, I mean, you can send a blitz behind it, but Sorensen and via proxy, Shanahan are so conservative that chances are if you have 5-man lines on the defense, you're probably not sending a 6th, certainly not a 7th. They could send a safety or a cornerback or a linebacker off the edge. They could stunt, whatever they want to do. But the benefit of a 5-man line is like you're hoping that your 5 can beat the 5 offensive linemen one-on-one. Now, of course, you could have tight ends staying in to chip, help protect. Running backs can do that as well. And the Patriots may have the biggest running back tandem in the league between Ramondre Stevenson and Antonio Gibson. They're both, 225 plus. They're big, powerful backs. But let's see, what the changes are going to be. And, he said it in the beginning of his quote, but if you can't get there with 4, you've got to mix it up. We mixed it up throughout the year. We've all watched all 3 games. There are, I'm sure, nuances that we as fans maybe missed if you're not going back and watching the game multiple times or watching the all 22 footage. Did they blitz some? Yes, but at the lowest percentage through 3 weeks in the NFL. 6.5% of dropbacks resulted in a 49ers sending a blitz, sending pressure. They may not need to do that against New England, but at the same time, if your 4-man front or 5-man front is not going to get home, is not going to make a quarterback feel uncomfortable, you will pay severely with someone like Matthew Stafford, even though they had no receivers, versus paying moderately, let's say, versus someone like Jacoby Brissett, who has their starting receivers, even though they're not that great. Probably still better than what the Rams trotted out. Although the offensive scheme that McVay has is going to be light years ahead of whatever Gerard Mayo and his offensive staff are going to cook up. Now, since we're talking about the D-line, let's talk run defense. And run D rankings this year for San Francisco based on EPA per play, which is an analytical measure, expected points added. In 2021, the run D per this analytical measure ranked second in the NFL. In 2022, it ranked second in the NFL. Last year, 26th. And 2024, so far through 3 games, 28th. Now, you're going through 3 different defensive coordinators. 2021 and 2022 was DeMeco Ryans. Last year was Steve Wilks. This year is Nick Sorensen. So, and remember that the early part of the years for DeMeco Ryans in 2021 and 2022, but more specifically 2021, did not look great. First half of the season, letting up a lot of points, not getting home. Run D wasn't great, and they wound up buckling down the second half of the year, at least for run D, getting this EPA to second and being a top 7 run defense in DeMeco Ryans' 2 years here. Even Steve Wilks, the run D was a top 10 unit overall. It just fell apart the last third of the season and in the playoffs. Another thing that we can look at, the commonality of the drop-off started in 2023 when Javon Hargrave got here. Are we going to pin everything on him? No. Still 28th. 2 right now middling defensive coordinators in 2023 and 2024. And Nick Sorensen's learning on the job, guys. Like, he's still figuring out maybe how to tie the rush and the run D to the back end and trying to figure out personnel. I mean, it's in a way pretty apparent, like across the board, who your starters are, but if they're mixing anything in sub packages or third downs or more run D associated downs, he's probably still figuring out, what his best mix is. And of course, there are just some that they are just getting beaten up in some ways in the run D and getting outcoached in the pass D. That's driving all of us crazy, and I'm sure 49er players and coaches as well. But the drop-off in this analytical measurement started with Javon Hargrave. So you want to mix in how much of it is a Hargrave, not a Hargrave-specific thing, but he is more of a penetrating, pass-rushing defensive tackle than a run stuffer. Do I think he's the sole reason why it dropped from 2 in 21 and 22, that ranking to 26th or 28th this year? No. Is he a part of it? Probably. In addition to having 2 new defensive coordinators. I'm not saying that plugging in a T.Y. McGill or having Malik Collins and Jordan Elliott as your 2 starting defensive tackles is going to solve this, because I still believe this is still a schematic issue. I mean, you can run blitz. It's not only about passing, right? You can send run blitzes. You can manipulate offensive line blocking schemes and maybe sell out a little bit more when it's an obvious run, taking the right angles, finding the right gaps, pursuing outside when it is an outside run, not getting caught up in the wash with blockers or peeking inside. But it's not just this analytical measurement, right? So right now, the 49ers are 21st in yards per rush. They're giving up 4.1 yards per carry. And their success rate versus a run, when it's an obvious rushing down, they are 28th in the league. There's a lot to be desired across the board with the 49ers defense. It's not just the run defense, but we're starting off the show, this segment, talking about the impact of the Hargrave injury. And when we get into the Niners-Patriots preview, you know what the Patriots are going to focus on. You know where they're going to focus their offensive attention, at least initially, right? Seems pretty obvious. Even if Hargrave was healthy and playing. But with him being out, you can bet that the run game is going to be a big part of what the Patriots are going to do. So let's turn from the defense to the offense, from running to receiving. Brandon Ayuk, slow start to the season. No one is going to dispute that. Brian Baldinger of Fox Sports had a couple quotes. Let's start with this one of what he had to say about Ayuk's performance. Quote, "He looks pedestrian, and he's playing like a pedestrian. You don't see the moves to separate. He just doesn't seem like the same person. He doesn't have any sort of swag about him at all right now. He just seems like a guy out there." Yeah, he's not playing well. He's improved from week 1 to 2 to last week, even though there were multiple drops last week. There's been improvement as it comes with practice and conditioning and getting on the same page with Purdy and the offense as a whole, right? The separation, though, you don't see the moves to separate. So based on analytics that are floating out there in the social media world, Ayuk is still near the top of the list, wide receiver-wise, at gaining separation. He's probably, at least last week, was the number one progression in a lot of reads when you don't have Kittle and Debo and McCaffrey, even though obviously Jennings got 11 receptions for $175 and 3 touchdowns. It's still a timing thing. It's still a rust thing for him. This is to be expected for me for the first month of the season. This is Ayuk's preseason. Actually, we shouldn't say preseason because he wouldn't have played that much. This is his training camp, right? 0 training camp, which lasts what? About 6 weeks. He had none of that just because he was there in person, listening to meetings and, jogging up and down the field and dapping up Kyle and John doesn't mean anything for the physical aspect of getting ready to play football. So this is totally to be expected. And even then, like the game last week, the stats, 5 for 48 yards, the 3 drops were bad. He had 10 targets. He was given opportunities, just couldn't cash in. And Ayuk himself thinks, and here's a quote from him, something that's contributing to it. He didn't take at least from what I heard and read, didn't necessarily take responsibility for the drops. I don't know if he was actually asked that, but someone should come out and say, listen, I got to be better. It's concentration. I got to work on my timing and rhythm with Brock. Yeah, but I got to make sure that I squeeze the ball and protect it when it gets to me. But here was his quote. "They're defending me a little bit different. They just know what we want to do, what we like to do, what me and Brock like to do especially." Again, didn't address the drops. Might have before or after in that interview clip that I saw. I don't know, but that's just what he thinks he's seeing. And last week, at least, it would have made sense because of no Debo, no Kittle, and no McCaffrey. It helped open up things only for Juwan Jennings because no one else on the team beyond Ayuk and Jennings had more than 2 receptions. So one of the things I'm going to be talking about in the preview of the game against the Patriots is you got to spread it around a little more. They may not even need to spread it around to beat New England, but little Conley, little Eric Sauber, Juice, there's still enough weapons that it doesn't have to be so heavily a 2-man show. And Baldinger went even a step farther. Now, here's a quote about Juwan Jennings, which to me is a casual take, but I'll read it. Quote, "Jennings has always been dependable. Sure. His hands weren't great this first year, was a little bit of the dropsies, but he's become a dependable 3rd and Juwan target." Back to the quote, "But maybe you can watch the game and say, maybe they paid the wrong guy." No. If you were a casual that never watched a football game before in your life, or certainly never watched a 49er game before in your life, You may come away from that game saying, oh, Juwan Jennings is he the number one receiver? He's one of the best receivers in the league. All right. How much of Jennings' game was Ayuk drawing coverage away from him? Now, Eric Saubert, I think, tight end only had 1 or 2 catches. So it's not like they had someone like Kittle, which could have drawn even more attention, freeing up Jennings even more in the passing game. So they were still at a detriment or a negative in terms of marquee name targets, right? Jennings got his opportunities, got open, fought for that jump ball that was underthrown, that he, put his arms under the defensive back and wrestled it away from the D-back, not taking anything away from Juwan Jennings' performance on this past Sunday against the Rams. Not at all. But it's a casual take if you're even suggesting and not saying sarcastically that maybe they paid the wrong guy. No, Jennings kind of is who he is. I thought this past game that Chris Conley would have gotten the start over Jennings. Conley didn't even get the third wide receiver snaps over Ronnie Bell. And that was obviously, as we know, an issue throughout the game, but specifically toward the end of the game. I believe that'll change this week against New England. But Jennings' big game, it was really, maybe 2 or 3-fold. One, the fact that Ayuk was there and he garnered a lot of the eyeballs. 2, the Niners can run the ball. I mean, they didn't go for over 100. They went for about, 134 yards, but they didn't go for 100 with Jordan Mason. And 3 is confidence. Once Brock started feeding Juwan, you could see Juwan getting more confident. You can see Brock getting more confident in Jennings, and the way that it just kind of fed off each other as the game went along. So taking nothing away from Jennings' great game. He had a great game now against the Rams. Great game in the Super Bowl. Jennings' great games equal losses, unfortunately. Hopefully against New England, I'm superstitious. Maybe he can have a modest game and the Niners can get a victory. Now let's just stick with receivers. Kyle was asked about rookie receiver Jacob Cowing, who saw 0 snaps against the Rams, was just out there on special teams as a punt returner. And it was brought up because in the days leading up to the Rams game, General Manager John Lynch was on, I believe, the radio and was asked about Cowing, and he thought that there was the possibility that Cowing would see some meaningful snaps against the Rams. The media asked Kyle about that, and here was the quote from Kyle. Quote, because it wasn't the plan. If there would have been an injury, Cowing would have played, but he wasn't ready to do that yet. And so we kept it at punt returner. But you have 5 guys up. So if someone did get hurt, he had to be ready, and then he would have gotten those reps. So he was 5th behind Ayuk, Jennings, Bell, and Conley. I still keep going back to, but he wasn't ready to do that yet. What is it about the offense that it's so complex that receivers just can't get it when you can see Malik Neighbors making an instant impact with the Giants, an offensively challenged team with a bad quarterback? Marvin Harrison Jr. making an impact in Arizona with Kyler Murray. Do you think Andy Reid, do you think Sean McVay would sit would have an offense that rookies wouldn't be able to participate in sooner rather than later? I mean, Rashee Rice had a good start to the Chiefs season last year when he was a rookie, has had a very good start to the season this year. Now, the thing that wasn't spoken about in that quote, and it was a player that wasn't spoken about, but we can infer, what is this going to mean for Ricky Pearsall? Whenever he is healthy enough to play, he's not going to play. He hasn't really been, obviously the gunshot thing, he hasn't been practicing. What timing is he getting on? Cowing missed a lot of the training camp with a hamstring injury, but did play in all 3 preseason games, which is a different animal than regular season. I get it. But Pearsall didn't do any of that. And by the time Pearsall is ready to come back, Debo, knock on wood, should be okay from that calf injury. He's not going to, play this week against the Patriots, but maybe week 5 against Arizona. Kittle will be back. So you're going to have a situation where Pearsall is going to be both buried and not ready. And you could see the situation where if you're going to take Kyle at face value, that maybe Cowing leapfrogs Pearsall because he's at least had the benefit, Jacob Cowing's had the benefit of being on the team and learning the playbook since, the beginning of the preseason. So not that it's a wasted first round pick by any means, but I think we are farther away from seeing anything from Pearsall, given how Kyle is explaining why Cowing isn't on the field. Now, Brock Purdy got some flowers this week, not nearly as many as he should have. I mean, part of it was because it was a loss, right? So people aren't going to talk about the losing quarterback as much as if he had won the game. Then they would talk about the 3 touchdowns and putting the team on his back. And, narratives are scripted a certain way, and it's certainly more of an appealing narrative when you're talking about a QB who won the game versus one who lost the game, even though he didn't lose the game. The defense lost the game. But Purdy leads the NFL with 25 completions, 10 to 19 yards downfield. Now, if that's not sexy enough for you, chicks dig the long ball and everything, where is he and throws 20 plus yards downfield? I don't have that stat. But he leads the NFL in the 10 to 19 yard intermediate range. He's pushing the ball downfield. Remember, this is Kyle Shanahan's offense, a West Coast, get it out, yards after the catch type of offense, which we're actually going to get into in the preview, talking about Yak. 25 completions between 10 and 19 yards downfield. Lamar Jackson is second with 14. So nearly doubling that up. Let's keep going. Purdy has the most games with a 130 plus rating, which is ridiculously high in the first 3 seasons of a player's tenure with a team. You can think about that and go, well, yeah, he's an efficient quarterback, and 130 passer rating or more that's very impressive. But yeah, I can see that in Kyle's offense and the weapons that he has. Yeah, okay, it makes sense. Here's why it's ridiculously impressive. The first 3 years of Brock's time with the Niners, it's not 3 full seasons, guys. He's played in 24 games. The number of games in 2022, all 16 games in 2023, because he didn't play the last game, week 18, and 3 games so far. So he has the most 130 plus passer rating games in a quarterback's first 3 seasons in NFL history, when other quarterbacks would have been evaluated either on 48 or 51 games. Remember, it used to be a 16-game season, so 16 times 3 is 48. Now it's a 17-game season, 17 times 3 is 51. He's doing it. He has that record in half the possible number of games played. And if you dial down the quarterback rating a bit to over 110 or 110 and more, since week 14 of his rookie year in 2022, he's got the most games at least 110 plus, 15. The next closest is Dak Prescott with 8, Lamar Jackson with 6, Mahomes, Allen, Stafford with 4, and Jalen from Philadelphia with 4 as well. Highly, highly efficient. It's not just about the weapons. It's not just about the play calling. It's still able to process and get the ball out on time to your playmakers. Brock has had a ridiculously good start to his year. Anybody that's saying that they need to see more from him is just a casual or a hater, or it's because he was not a first-round draft pick. Any way you cut up the stats and the analytics, Brock is a top 10 quarterback. Any way you cut it up. A lot of people here are just not here. A lot of people out there are just kind of slow on the uptake, and they want to give the love to Jordan Love or Anthony Richardson or CJ Stroud, who got boat raced at Minnesota and did not look good at all. Purdy outplayed him, and the Texans lost that game 34-7. I thought CJ Stroud, even though it's year 2, so good, supposed to elevate, he got hammered. It happens. 1 week, it happens. But other players like a Burrow, like a Dak, players that are not held to the same standard or are not minimized as much as Brock is. Hopefully that narrative ends. And to me, it honestly, it shouldn't have ended with the Ram game. I said this last podcast because I was waiting for the haters to say, yeah, Brock had a good game. The loss wasn't on him. Yeah, Brock had a good game. And yeah, he was missing Debo and McCaffrey and Kittle, but the Rams were completely depleted and they were a shit team. Missing two of their top three corners, missing a starting safety, missing their best pass rusher who was traded in the offseason. I thought that was going to be the narrative. It's not. And I'm not, maybe I am a negative person or a bit conservative, but I thought that was going to be pushed out there by the Nick Wrights of the world, by the people out there that are looking to keep holding Brock down or doubting Brock or inventing reasons why he is not viewed in the same light as other quarterbacks who also have talent around them. Give me a great quarterback in NFL history. I'm not going to say that Brock's great, but name me someone, a Hall of Famer, a quarterback that's been to multiple Pro Bowls, all pros, that has not had weapons. They go hand in hand. The only one you can think of is maybe Tom Brady. And he had some weapons throughout the course of his career, whether it was Gronk or Randy Moss, but that wasn't an offensively packed team outside of what was it, 2007? Brady's the anomaly, granted how long he played, the number of Super Bowls, how well he played, all that good stuff. But beyond him, if you're a great quarterback or viewed as a great quarterback currently or historically, it's probably because you had pretty damn good weapons at your disposal. Now, quickly on the injury front heading into this game, Javon Hargrave is out. He's not gone on IR yet as of this recording on Thursday, but he will. Debo is going to be out for at least this week with the calf strain. George Kittle has been practicing. He's limited. There's the possibility he could play, or they may look at this New England game and say, do we really need Kittle to win? They didn't need Kittle or Debo to beat the Rams, and they still lost. So this isn't an all hands on deck type of game. But you could argue that it is because you do not want to be 1-3 the way that Seattle has gotten out to a 3-0 start, even though they are at Detroit Monday night. And linebacker D. Winters, who a lot of people are clamoring for to get more playing time in place of Devondre Campbell, re-aggravated his ankle. He is questionable, at least as of right now. Not sure if he's going to be able to play or how well he'll be able to play against New England. But let's pivot now and dive into the preview. Niners hosting the Patriots from Santa Clara, 4:05 Eastern time. The Niners are a 10.5 point favorite. And I wanted to save this combination of stats for the preview. The 49ers have three offensive players who are in the top three at their respective positions in terms of yards gained. Brock is second in passing yards in the NFL. Jordan Mason, second in rushing yards. And Juwan Jennings, based on his huge game last week, is third in receiving yards. Interestingly enough, although when you think about who they're missing, McCaffrey for the first 3 weeks, Debo and Kittle last week, and potentially Debo and Kittle again this week, the 49ers, who, they themselves tout, yak yards after the catch. Their skill players are yak bros. Their yards after the catch through 3 weeks is the second worst in the NFL. Last year was the fifth best. That will change once you get your full personnel on the field. As for the Patriots, they started out with what many thought was a very impressive opening week win at Cincinnati, beating the Bengals 16-10. But the way the Bengals have looked since then, maybe it's not as impressive a win as we thought. After that, the Patriots went home, lost to the Seahawks in overtime, 23-20. And this past Thursday got smoked by the Jets, 24-3. The Jet game was especially bad. I mean, remember, the Patriots were a franchise that absolutely owned the Jets for 2 decades, courtesy of Tom Brady and Bill Belichick and a really good defense. And the Jets not having Aaron Rodgers and a competent offense or competent team really in general for a lot of that time. But the Jets held the Patriots to 139 total yards, 11 first downs. They caused a turnover, and the Jets had a 20-minute time of possession advantage. More than a quarter, they controlled the clock against New England. Not like they needed to control the clock, but they just said, hey, we're going to do it anyway. We're going to stomp you, and we're not going to give you the ball. Not like we're worried that you're going to score because the offense is so lacking and putrid. And here are the rankings for New England. Overall, 246 yards a game on offense. That is dead last. 102 passing yards per game. Dead last. They do rank 8th in rushing yards per game at 144. And they're scoring 13 points per game, which is not dead last. It is one better at 31st. Defensively, marginally better. Overall defense, they're giving up 327 yards per game, 19th in the league. Pass defense, giving up 244, 27th in the league. The rush defense is good, 83 per game. That's 5th in the NFL. Points per game, they're giving up 19, 11th in the NFL. The Patriots are the ultimate get-right game, especially at home. Having New England having to fly across the country with not a lot of weapons on offense and some defensive answers, some things that the Patriots can do well defensively. They can stop the run. They're very multiple in their looks, in their fronts, and with their back seven, they can make things somewhat difficult on an offense. Had a very good chance of winning the Seattle game at home. And the Jets, they just got completely boat raced out of MetLife Stadium. But they're as lacking as the Patriots offense is. They're going up against a Niner defense that is not nearly as bad defensively as the Patriots are offensively, but they're not too far off. And here's some more defensive stats to mull over and possibly vomit about. The Niners points per game allowed, 25.5. That's 21st in the NFL. Their defensive efficiency overall, 25th in the NFL. Their overall defensive EPA, when I read the rush EPA earlier on in the show, now it's overall defensive EPA, 24th in the NFL. Yards allowed per play, 6.1. Every time the offense hikes the ball, the Niners give up an average of 6.1 yards. That's 30th in the NFL. And their third down conversions, you guys can see the theme, and you know how bad they've been on third downs. They are allowing third down conversions at a 53% clip. Also good for 30th in the NFL. So, Nick Sorensen, what you got? And Brandon Staley and Chris Kosarik on the D-line and Kyle Shanahan. What you got? What's happening with the scheme? What's happening with players? And there's been, I don't want to call it an outcry because that seems a bit dramatic, but people are hoping that maybe there are some personnel changes on the defense. Devondre Campbell, veteran free agent, brought in this past game against the Rams. He was targeted 3 times, allowed 3 catches for 53 yards, and that big pass interference on a backup tight end in overtime that got the Rams into field goal range. And cornerback Isaac Yiadom, don't want to call him Ambry Thomas Jr., I guess senior because he's older, just yet. But last week against the Rams, complement of backup wide receivers, he was targeted 5 times, allowed 5 catches for 32 yards, and also a pass interference for good measure. So the tandem of Campbell and Yiadom, it's not a law firm because it would be a bad one, but the tandem, 8 targets, 8 catches, 105 yards, 2 pass interferences, and a partridge in a pear tree. Bad. Are there going to be any changes being made? Well, We know how Kyle feels about rookies. Do they feel like someone like Renardo Green could take over on the outside in 3 wide receiver sets? Would it fall to someone like Rock Ya-Sin, who's been active but hasn't gotten a ton of snaps? Second-year player Darrell Luter has not been active the past 2 games. The only way Luter gets active is if someone is deactivated on the in the cornerback room. Potentially it could be somewhere else on the roster, but more than likely a cornerback. And I just don't see that happening. D Winters re-aggravated his ankle. He was getting some playing time in the Rams game. I mean, they were rotating him back in. He missed the first 2 weeks with the ankle. They wanted to get him some playing time, and Devondre Campbell was caught off guard by that. I forget what the exact quote was, but he said, yeah, I wasn't expecting that. I don't know if he expected to play every snap. I think he did in week 1. I'm not sure if he did in week 2 against the Vikings. I'd have to go back and check. But I think maybe the injury would work in Devondre Campbell's favor, but work against us fans and people that maybe want to see a different player out there. It could fall to Curtis Robinson. You know, if Winters isn't able to go at all, is Robinson. It could be, Flanagan Fowles. Are they next man up to get some snaps? I'm not even sure if someone like Tatum Bethune, the rookie out of Florida State, was active last game against the Rams, or if Winters is declared out, does he become activated? I doubt that they would put him in a role where he would see, even 10 snaps. So position changes, while it sounds good, and I think it's a good knee-jerk reaction that we all had, I don't know if this is the game that Kyle and Nick are going to experiment with that. I think they feel, or they could feel, that this is a get right game, and let's get right with the players that we're starting the season with. Now, the flip side of that is the Pats shouldn't really hurt them. They shouldn't outscore San Francisco. I mean, the way that the Patriots win this game is like the way that the Bears won their week 1 game against the Titans, right? They would have to get a punt return for a touchdown, an interception return for a touchdown. The Bears didn't score an offensive touchdown at all. It was field goals and defensive and special team scores. I feel like that's the only way to definitive. That's probably the only way that the Patriots can win this game. But again, did anybody see the Rams beating San Francisco last week? Any given Sunday. And let's get into the Pats approach. You know what the Patriots are going to do. They're going to want to run the ball down San Francisco's throat until they prove that the Niners can stop it. And even if they prove that the Niners can stop it, they're still going to run the ball because the weapons on the outside aren't that great. And I'm sure they don't want to give Jacoby Brissett, even though he's a veteran, and I would be very happy if he was the backup on this team, I don't think they want to put the game fully in his hands or lean on him too much, is maybe the more fair way of saying it. Lean on him too much. I mentioned earlier Ramondre Stevenson and Antonio Gibson, big backs, both over 6'1", both over 225 pounds. They can pound the rock. It's not like the Niners don't have big guys on the D line or linebackers that are the same size as these running backs, but they can wear a D line and a defense out. If the Patriots have nearly the same success as every other team has had, or collectively has had, against San Francisco, giving some of those terrible overall defensive stats I gave, but specifically run defense stats, they're going to have to pass it, and they're probably going to have to pass it a lot in the second half because I envision them playing catch up. But when they do, just at least start out the first quarter or second quarter, conservative, right? Like, this is a game where it could get away from New England early, even if the Patriots are okay offensively. It's going to be a conservative passing game, control the clock with the run, and limit mistakes and negative plays. So obviously interceptions, obviously sacks. They might not have to worry about sacks at all, the way the Niners are not generating pressure, and negative plays, which would be a sack, which would be a run caught behind the line of scrimmage. They need to certainly not get behind the sticks and stay ahead of them. A 2nd and 8 is obviously better than a 2nd and 12, but if they can get to a 2nd and 6 or a 3rd and 3, then a run or a pass is an option that the Niners would have to defend. The leading wide receiver on this Patriot team is tight end Hunter Henry. And even there, I think he only has about 150 yards receiving through through 3 games. Their top 3 receivers, Demario Douglas, KJ Osborne, and rookie Jalen Polk out of Washington. Kendrick Bourne, former 49er, is still on the PUP list. He's a couple to several weeks away from returning, and it is still absurd to me how during the Brandon Ayuk trade drama that he was actually mentioned as a potential piece to come back to the 49ers in a trade for Ayuk in addition to, draft picks or whatever may have been. Even if Kendrick Bourne was healthy, I would not have wanted him. I mean, if you're going to say you're not going to get maybe Demario Douglas instead of Kendrick Bourne, but the fact that Matt Mayoko and others were reporting that Kendrick Bourne was part of a trade package and he would not have been ready for the first month and a half or 2 months of the season is absurd. I mean, and thank God they didn't pull the trigger on that trade, even though Ayuk has started off slow. You have the Ricky Pearsall shooting. You have Debo hurt, like McCaffrey. Great that everything worked out the way it was. And Ayuk's going to iron out the kinks. It's just a matter of time. And I really think it could start this week and extend against the Cardinals. And then after that, we see how this team's going to fare going up against Seattle, who's probably going to still be leading the NFC West at that point. But the Patriots defensively, they've done well against the run. They're a top 5 unit. Control the run game. It's coming. It's coming with Mason mainly. It's going to come with Guerendo with a handful of carries. And then obviously Brock Purdy, no design runs, but they do have to account for him after last week's 10 for 41 performance. Can the Patriots make San Francisco one-dimensional? It's the type of game where even if the Patriots bottle up the run ridiculously well, the Niners should be able to throw on them. I don't want to say throw all over them, but should be able to throw on them because, again, they're still missing 2, if not 3 offensive weapons. So this isn't a game where, it in no way, shape, or form should be a shootout, because if it's a shootout and you can make a team one-dimensional, take away the run, then you can tee off on the pass. The pass is coming, tee off on the quarterback. That's not going to be the case. So that's why I'm saying, even if the Patriots can control the Niners running game, I think the Niners will get out to a big enough lead, and a big enough lead against the Patriots might be 10 points. Like, a 10-0 Niner lead, it may be game over because the Patriots just don't have the weapons outside of the Niners hurting themselves, turnovers, busted coverages, letting up big plays, letting the Patriots gash them on the ground. I'm sure the Patriots are going to they're going to commit to the run. That's their identity. It doesn't matter. And the Niners' identity used to be taking the run game away. It's not anymore. But the Patriots are going to commit to that. But even bottling up the 49er running game is going to leave all sorts of issues for a Patriots defense and a team overall that just does not match up talent-wise, even with who San Francisco's missing. But they have some players on defense, right? You have defensive end Keon White. He's got 4 sacks on the year. If he lines up against Colton McKivitz all game, you need to hold your breath a little bit. You have cornerback Christian Gonzalez. He is questionable, but should be able to play. And you have 2 strong safeties in Jabril Peppers and Kyle Duggar. So that secondary, with a little bit of a pass rush from Keon White and others, could do a little something, right? How Kyle negates that, whether it's through the running game or whether it's helping with a tight end or a running back to chip any of the DNs. Quick throws, is this type of game where Jacob Cowing does get involved? He should be closer this week than last week, you would think, right? Another week of learning and growth. San Francisco's approach, I'm going to sum it up in one statement, and then we'll dive into it a little bit. The approach is they need to show they can dominate an inferior team. They did not show it against the Rams for the last 3 quarters. They showed it in the first quarter, getting up 14-0, 2 straight scoring drives, getting a stop for the Rams. And obviously the Rams had that trick play. And again, I'm saying, I think Kyle walked back his comments saying that they were in a putt safe on that, saying that they didn't have they didn't quite have the defensive look that they needed to on that punt. Yeah, no shit, Kyle. You weren't in a punt safe. You weren't. But the Niners need to dominate, right? Anything short of covering this spread at 10.5 and then some is still going to lead to questions about how much this 49er team bounced back, how good they really are, and how because offensively they don't have to make any adjustments, right? They don't. I mean, if even if Kittle doesn't play, it's going to be the same offensive personnel as last week against the Rams. So you're going to still run with that squad. And if Kittle does play, that's a boon. You have one extra weapon out there that they may not need against New England. So if his hamstring is a little bit iffy, you can see them sitting Kittle again. But they have to dominate this team. How can they do that? I mean, I think they should be able to do it just by Kyle calling a normal game plan. Nothing stupid, not getting away from the run when it's working or getting away from the pass when it's working, but still mix up the offense, right? Keep this defense off balance. Keep the run defense honest. Even though it's a good run defense, make them respect the run to the point that it opens up play action. That's going to be an every week type of thing because of the type of runner, such a hard runner and not a huge multi-dimensional back that Jordan Mason is. Mix it up. The Patriots do have a good run D, but they did play the Bengals, who early in the season struggled running the ball. Same with Seattle week 2. Last week, the Jets did a little bit better with their duo of Breece Hall and Brandon Allen. So I'm not going to say the numbers are skewed. They have players in their front 7. And they have players in their back 4, as well, back 5 when count nickelbacks. Mason should still get 20 plus carries. This offense, this run game should still get 30 plus carries. So if it's low 20s for Mason, 4, 5, 6 for Grendo, and I'm sure Purdy's going to take off a couple times. This should be a 30 plus carry game. And if the game gets away from New England, in the third or fourth quarter, then you can see, maybe someone like a Grendo getting more carries, a Patrick Taylor coming in to maybe really push that to like a 35 or 40 plus type of rushing attempt effort. I don't think there's a need to force it to Brandon Ayuk. Spread it around. Like, it doesn't need to be so, and you can see the Patriots. I don't know. The Patriots are going to look at this game and go, boy, Juwan Jennings, man, see what he did against the Rams. We got to take him away. I still, the physical attributes of Juwan Jennings are still okay. He's not that fast. He's not a great route runner. He has good hands, but they can be suspect at times. How many times have we seen him, on instant replays, double catch a ball? Ferocious blocker and, good yak, good strong runner after the catch. But I don't think they're going to go into this looking to take Juwan Jennings away. They're going to go into this looking to take Brandon Ayuk away. And I think they can live with Juwan Jennings having a big game. I'm sure coaches are going to say, no one's going to have a big game. Like, we don't want anyone to have a big game, but it's not like, these aren't like the Michael Jordan rules or anything, or saying like, all right, let Juwan Jennings get his and we'll control everybody else. Like, Jennings isn't that player. And I don't think that's going to be the game plan for New England, but there should be more of a spread it around type of philosophy offensively. Get Saubert more involved. If you're running with 2 tight ends, a 2 tight end set without Kittle, get Tonjes involved. Make Mason and Juice viable options out of the backfield for checkdowns. Get Chris Conley in ahead of Ronnie Bell. Hell, get Jacob Cowing in against Ronnie Bell. And I don't want to sit here and crucify him too much. Those 2 drops last week were bad. The one at the end of the game was terrible, but Chris Conley is a better receiver than Ronnie Bell right now. And Chris Conley may be a better receiver than Ronnie Bell ever becomes. So the not trusting Cowing, but trusting Bell over Conley thing, it's like Shanahan's talking out of both sides of his mouth. Does Bell have more of a grasp of the offense than Cowing, since this is Bell's second year versus Cowing being a rookie? Sure. But Chris Conley was with the team last year, is with the team this year, was leaned upon in the playoffs, played in the Super Bowl, made more of an impact the latter quarter of the season or third of the season than Ronnie Bell did, and certainly in the playoffs as well. I don't know what changed in training camp or the preseason where Shanahan's like, oh, let's go with Ronnie Bell over. Should not be the case this week. And on defense, like, come on, guys, can you scheme up stopping the run, right? You know it's coming. Everybody knows it's coming. The Patriots are going to hit on some play action. The Patriots are probably going to take deep shots on Yadam's side. They're probably going to stay away from Ward. Maybe they stay away from Demo a little bit as well. They are going to find holes in the intermediate part of the zone, or they're going to take shots deep, because why not? Because they know the Niners know their running team. They know San Francisco is going to want to stop the run. That's the most consistent way the Patriots can hurt San Francisco. They know it's coming. The Pats should feed off of that. They should play off of that, play action off of that, right? Will they generate pressure on Jacoby Brissett? How will they generate pressure on Jacoby Brissett? If it's obvious, I can see the Niners early on sticking to the defense and the philosophy that they have. Front four, cover with 7. Do you need to cover 7 against, this Patriot receiving core and Hunter Henry? Probably not. I'm also not saying you go man up all game. But maybe this is a game where if Charvarius Ward is fully healed from the knee and hamstring injuries, maybe he follows around to Mario Douglas. Put him on their best receiver. You're not going to put him on Hunter Henry, although that would be interesting, wouldn't it? Just have him line up on the tight end all game. That would have been cool if he lined up on Travis Kelce all game during the Super Bowl, right? Put Demo and someone else out wide, because the strength of the Chiefs offense wasn't the receivers. It's a little bit more so now that this year with Xavier Worthy, Rashee Rice, and when Hollywood Brown comes back, which I guess is probably December based on what I last read. But are they going to come out same old, same old? And if at least the pass rush and the run D isn't working, then are we going to see a 5-man front? Then are we going to see more run blitzes? Then are we going to see something different schematically to get to Brissett, to slow down the run? Something more consistently different than we've seen the first 3 weeks? And Niners should just come out first game, first defensive play, 5-man line. 5-man line is what historically has given San Francisco problems running the ball. And whether it's because it somehow negates inside-outside zone, because everybody is manned up, I do not know. But if it gives the Niners problems, it should give other teams problems as well. Maybe New England is one of those teams, maybe not. But they have to do something to control those 2 big battering rams that they have at running back. And Jacoby Brissett, we mentioned how lacking the offense is, averaging 102 yards per game. That number, that overall number of passing offense, takes into account negative yards from sacks. In terms of the pure passing that Brissett's done, he has not thrown for more than 149 yards in any game, and there's only been 3 games, but any game this season. Would any of us be shocked if this is the game that he goes over 150, over 175, over 200, the way the Niners defense has been playing? Based on the names on the back of the jersey, it should not happen. And I said last podcast, this is a defense. Forget about the scheme for a second, but this is a defense where the individual parts are greater than the whole. The individual players, the individual parts are greater than the whole. And that cannot be the case in a team sport, right? Go back to Bill Belichick, what he said for 2 decades in New England: do your job. Everybody has a job to do. They have the talent to do it well or really well. And that should come together and coalesce into a pretty friggin' good defense. And it hasn't for probably, 10, 12 straight games now, going back to last season. All that being said, this is a game that San Francisco wins, that I think they cover. I'm going to go 27-13 San Francisco. Listen, would I be shocked at a 30-10 or something like that? No, but I'm going to give the Patriots offense, Patriots defense, Patriots offense, Jared Mayo, and specifically, I'll give them the nod in terms of how they could match up against the Niners D, which has not looked good. I'm not going to come out and say, the Niners are just going to dominate them. They're going to hold them down the way that the Jets did. Could it happen? Sure. But I want to see it happen first before I make that prediction in any game. And even if I see it happen against New England, what the hell does that really mean? The biggest takeaway that I hope that the coaches and even the players get out of this game, should they win, like I'm projecting, and I'm sure a lot of people out there are projecting, that they don't think, well, we got it all solved now. But and they would never make something that absolute, but they would take more away from this game defensively than they should because of how bad the Patriots are on offense, right? There should not be a, well, this was Isaac Yadam's get right game, or this was Devondre Campbell's get right game, or, oh, I guess we don't miss, and I hate to use the word weeks, I'm not on the team. I mean, a Niner player or coach saying this, I guess we don't miss Javon Hargrave that much because T.Y. McGill or Malik Collins or Jordan Elliott or Evan Anderson or Shaquille Brown, Kevin Givens, they stepped up and played really well. And you know, in that instance, it's against a team that you know is going to want to run the ball. So that cuts two different ways, right? It's a team that runs the ball well, but it's also a team that you know is going to run the ball. So you should devote more resources to stopping the run, right? The only way you take out anything positive from this game, if this is a complete ass kicking, like 44-3, 34, like something ridiculously lopsided. And even then, I would just caution, it's one game, right? Still got Arizona coming in next week. Still got Seattle 2 Thursdays from now. One game at a time, right? But assuming an utter collapse on offense or Brock completely craps the bed, you know, injuries, turnovers, whatever. This is a game San Francisco should win. I'm not going to go out there on a limb and say they're going to blow them out. 14 points, like, you know, 2 field goals and a touchdown maybe for New England feels good. 3 touchdowns, 2 field goals for San Francisco to me feel, and it could be more or less than that for either team. But I would, gun to my head, take San Francisco laying the 10.5, and the over under is 40.5, and I'm right at 40. So I don't know if I would touch that for whatever it's worth. But that concludes the 49ers Plus podcast for today and this week. Like always, I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule for making us part of your listening routine. Week 4 kicks off tonight. I'm recording this during the day. Giants hosting the Cowboys. Whoever loses, I win. Live in the Northeast, don't like the Giants, indifferent towards the Jets, but whatever, and have hated the Cowboys for 35 plus years. So whoever, just don't want to tie. Whoever loses, I win. That will kick off the NFL slate. Again, 2 Monday night games because capitalism. And we got the Niners smack dab in the middle of all that, 4:05 Eastern from Santa Clara. Next podcast will be probably Monday. There's an outside possibility it could be Tuesday. It's only a 1 podcast week next week because I am traveling the middle portion of the week. So only have 1 podcast next week. But between next Monday and Tuesday, enjoy the Niner game. It should be one that helps the team get on track. It's not going to be a cure for all ailments, but there should be some positive forward movement, right? So between when we speak again and now, stay happy, stay healthy, stay safe, everybody, and we will talk soon. Take care.